steadily it rises. Public preference for Lincoln Continental as the symbol for today's luxury motoring.
Hey, it's Jason ODB, the Lincoln Addict, and we're going to go over this 1961 Lincoln Continental Convertible in Sunburst Yellow. And I want to jump right into this. If you've come back based upon other reviews, thank you so much. Leave a comment, at least a thumbs up. If you're new, please consider subscribing. We cover these cars often in great detail. Of course, other content is available on the channel. So I recently, or the last video I produced was tying into some of the recent sales as April 2023 kind of comes to a close. And this was the next one that I hinted at. It's a 61, as I had mentioned, and I really want to get into the meat and potatoes here. So basically we see it's the Sunburst Yellow paint. Of course, it has the 430, and it goes in to give some of the basic detail that you would come to expect. It does mention that there is an aftermarket Clarion stereo that's mounted kind of under the dash, if you will. The Sunburst Yellow was the F paint code, and it was reportedly repainted under the prior ownership. The current owner has had this car about 20 years, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so we'll get to that. There's a hydraulic leak in the top mechanism, and it does not work. So that's a key thing that we're going to talk about. Of course, they did have 14s. So 61, 62, 63, they had the 14-inch wheels. In 64, they went to 15s, and the hubcaps changed in those years. But often regarded as, you'll often see people say that this is their favorite year Lincoln from the 60s, and it is a classic design, no doubt. We could see here where it talks about the trim. The seats look really, really good. I'm assuming that they were redone. If they were factory, fantastic, but they do still look good as well here. You can see the aftermarket car stereo. I love the look of this dash. I'm not really a person that's a fan of like a yellow car, but this Sunburst Yellow, I've always liked it. Kind of a little bit more rare. Don't seem to see it very often. It does show 50,000 miles, and they say approximately 2,000 were under the current ownership. The fuel tank was cleaned, and a replacement of a fuel pump was installed in November 2021. Records indicate the engine was repainted and serviced in 2003, including, you don't often see this, a replaced camshaft, spark plugs, and then, some of the typical things. Motor mounts, they're not super hard to change in these, a little bit tougher than some other cars, but they did also the oil sump pickup, so the oil pump and flywheel bolts. So they did a few things, and again, that was many years ago. We could see here in the earlier year Lincolns, the VIN plate or door tag. This is mounted in, this is like where your left foot would be when you're driving the car. So I mentioned before, and I haven't covered this in a lot of detail, this VIN plate, if you will, does end up moving to the door as the 60s go on these convertibles. Of course, it was built in Wixom, where all these cars were built. And the good thing I like about Bring a Trailer is they break all this down. So the 74A is the four-door convertible. Again, color F is Sunburst Yellow. The trim is beige leather. Built based upon, remember, we can break this down. So we know it was March 27th of 1961. It has the standard differential and the dual-range three-speed automatic. We're going to look at some of the detailed photos here, but I can tell you one thing that I'm not a fan of on this posting is there's really no video content, okay? Not everybody knows or is tech savvy, but pretty much if you've got a smartphone, you could take it out and hit record. And I do believe, my assumption is that Bring a Trailer will kind of handhold and help someone. I haven't really looked at, when we watch the videos, I never really looked to see. I'm assuming it's on the Bring a Trailer YouTube channel, so they probably just say, hey, text me the video or make some short videos and upload them to such and such site like Dropbox or something, and then they probably will upload those on behalf of the seller, kind of that hand-holding service that they offer, which is fantastic in my opinion. But again, texting with a friend Larry, shout out to Larry, a great supporter of the channel, and more to come on some things that he recently was able to help me with. in terms of a write-up. But bottom line is that we really need to see video, because we just went through the meat and potatoes of the actual write-up, and all it mentioned is that there's a leak with the top and it's not working. So that's your biggest, potential challenge you're going to have with a 60s Lincoln, especially a convertible. I'm going to try to do this with one hand here. I want to see what we're looking at. The convertible top mechanism was serviced in January 2023. There's a person that comments on this, and if this was serviced, there needs to be more detail here. What was done? Was it a complete overhaul? Was it just the pump was changed, solenoids? What was it? The thing I will tell you is John Cashman really reinforced this throughout his travels, and it's something I learned from him and the Lincoln Forum. In the earlier years, 60 Lincoln, so specifically here in 61, they used a different type of fluid. It was not the Type F. So when John would do a complete overhaul on this system, and he would change, the rams, the cylinders, the pump, the solenoids, and whatever else needed to be done, including the lines, he would essentially do that because you're getting rid of all of the old stuff, but you're also then going in with all new fluid. So all the old is out, and this would then take the Type F fluid. You never really want to mix the two fluids. It's just my understanding is you shouldn't do it. But I'll point out again, if the top is not working and there's not more detail into what was done, it makes you think like, okay, well, did they change one thing and it's not working? It could be simple to get it going, or it could be a challenge for the new owner. So let's look at the photos. Again, for whatever reason, I really dig this color. My buddy John Lyman at Stinkin' Lincoln, he had a Sunburst Yellow, and I got to ride in it, and it was, all original, and I just really, enjoyed it. To me, when we look at these photos, I mean, it looks like a nice car, and when I say nice, it looks like a kind of a nice survivor car is the best way I can put it, that it hasn't been really monkeyed with. This is a car that, I mean, I look at this photo and say, man, it's screaming, get in and drive and let's enjoy it. A commenter also mentioned, hey, if the top is not working and you were able to get it to work for this photo shoot, what did you do? Did you manually override it? Is it just seeping out fluid and you're worried, so you haven't been using it? Again, a little bit more detail on what was done to the top, or what the current challenge is, certainly would help, in my opinion, potentially get someone to jump in and make the purchase. It does have an Elvis plate on it. There is some paperwork. I didn't really pick up exactly, other than I know Elvis loved Cadillacs. He did like Lincolns as well. He had a Lehman Peterson, I believe, Lincoln. And you can see here the tie-in official Elvis Presley family parade car. Again, I didn't look into enough detail. I didn't have the time to really dig into the potential tie-in there, but you will see some paperwork where it does mention. You guys know, if you've been watching the channel, in 61 and then the early to mid 62s up until that point, you had the keyhole cover. I don't think I've reinforced that is on the driver and passenger side. So as I look at more photos of the cars, I tend to say, hey, I want to make sure I kind of reinforce that. The top looks good to me. I mean, this is a top that I think is fine. So that's a good thing. You don't have to necessarily get this car and work on changing the top right away, if at all. You can see the script is a little bit different. It looks like it's a little kind of smashed in here. Or is that just me? But the script is a little bit different than, it changes throughout the years. So I always liked it on the 61. This passenger mirror was not a factory thing. However, guys will add this to their car. Makes it a little bit easier to drive with the top up, of course. But if the top's down, as long as you can swing over and look over your right shoulder, you're good to go. That's how they drove these cars. Again, you can see the keyhole cover there on the passenger side. Again, if you like what we're doing here, please leave a comment. It definitely helps out the channel. Consider subscribing. I know a lot of you watch some of these videos and they just pop up in your feed, but if you actually tap on subscribe, it definitely helps us out. Shout out to the LCOC. That is the acronym for Lincoln Continental Owners Club. They've been around over half a century. And you can Google LCOC. I think it's a .org site, and you can subscribe and become an LCOC member. They have a publication they put out and things like that, and enthusiast. And again, that'll tie in more to something that someone I call a friend, Larry, helped me recently with a spotlight that they did in one of the regional publications. So thanks to Larry. You could see here what I like to look at, as I mentioned in the past, this what they call the dog leg. This right here is typical here. Seeing a little bit of this. My 64 is similar to this. You'll see a little bit of bubbling and whatnot. So this isn't anything I don't believe to be concerned with. And then you can see a little bit of the paint chipping here. Don't really know what's going on. Again, as I've said before, I'm a fan of a car like this, something that's not perfect. You can either, get in and enjoy it, hopefully right away, and then down the road, if you want to do a full restoration, I mean, this is a car that it looks like everything is there, and it hasn't really been monkeyed with, so to speak. I do like to look down here to see what does it look like under the doors. If I was looking at this car in person, I would certainly spend some time laying down here and taking a look. My 64 isn't perfect either. You can go and spend a lot of money and have all this stuff redone, nicer than probably the way it was after it left the factory. But again, that's depending on how much money you want to spend. We could see the door tag here, or, VIN, identification plate, whatnot. Again, it does move in the 60s up to here. It does have the manual windows. And again, as I've said, I kind of get confused on which years had the option of the electric, and then some years only had electric. Some of you guys have chimed in and helped, and I definitely appreciate that. That's just one thing I can't seem to totally always remember, especially when I'm doing these videos. I think the seats look fantastic. I love the color contrast. Even if these, my assumption is that they were redone, but even if they were, I don't know what it is. The leather just looks so awesome. I would not touch the seats at all. And of course, if someone gets the car and they end up painting it a different color, certainly. But I think this is a really nice car. And chime in. What do you guys think? Do you think the seats are original? They could be. If this car was really cared for and kept in the garage all these years, it very well may be original. I don't know if there's any little indicator that you guys are seeing that maybe that they're not original. But certainly, my friend Chris Dunn at Lincoln Land, I've seen some of his real nice cars, and it looks like this, and it's super plush, and it looks like the day it came out of the showroom. We can see the little speaker boxes back here. This is, again, something you could easily take out. You got to remember, it doesn't have a great sound system. That's certainly one thing that could be updated, and that's what you'll see here. A lot of people will end up putting little speaker pods. I appreciate this, even though it's maybe not sightly. I may not leave this the way it is, but I appreciate the fact that they haven't went in and cut into the doors and things like that. We've seen some kind of hack jobs before where people don't really execute it well. This is certainly something that could easily be taken out. Let me know what you guys think on the carpet. To me, from on this side, it looks like the carpet's been replaced maybe. I have a hard time believing this is the factory carpet, although oftentimes you can steam clean this stuff and make it look good. It does have the heel pad. If it was me, if I could get, the correct color, I would probably end up replacing it. When I took it all out, I would, Dynamat and, vacuum and clean all the floor and stuff like that. But you can see it does match with the kick panel, so it could be the factory carpet. Love the dash in these 61s. You got the 3 pods and with the wood grain. I covered a little bit of that when I did the full review of the 61 Lincoln Continental that Chris Dunn owns from Lincoln Land. So I talked a little bit about some of the options with the wood on the dash and whatnot. Everything is looking good here. Off the top of my head, I don't know that you could get seatbelts in 61, so those could be aftermarket seatbelts. That's my feeling based upon the color of them. I do know that there was an option, and some of those things I can remember, some I can't. But certainly, whether they're factory seatbelts or not, they actually look period correct to me, and I would leave those. Safety is important. There is a little thing here that says, Happy Birthday, Jennifer. So at some point, this car was a birthday gift to Jennifer. Chris Dunn at Lincoln Land recently pointed out to me something that I've never really noticed. I do know that these switches that control the courtesy lights, they are black. I believe the ones that you'll often see in other cars are sometimes white. The black are basically the original, which he had pointed out to me, and that's just something that I know they're black, but I've never really looked to see when they're white, so those are original. When the door is open, it'll turn on the courtesy lights and things like that, and then, of course, when the glove box is opened, this will turn on the glove box light. Here's what made me think possibly it's not the factory carpet. I mean, I can't see there being these type of wrinkles and cuts and whatnot, but regardless, it's not the end of the world. You can still cruise this car. The carpet's not going to affect that. Underneath the door, to me, looks pretty good. I mean, you're typically going to sometimes have a little bit of crustiness kind of going on in here. It just really, you want to get up in here and take a look and see how bad is it. And again, typically it's not going to be a deal breaker. These cars, like my friend TC often says, they often need a lot. I think you're better off when you get a car like this that is still driven. It's still appreciated. It's got an LCOC sticker on it, so presumably the person's kind of in the know a little bit of these cars and the history and things like that. So maybe that leads people to kind of care for it a little bit more and things like that. What do we see here? We see 61, 2, and I believe 3. The horns were mounted up here, so I haven't really talked a lot about that, but you will see the horns. They do move. I know in 64, they're not on the apron. And you can see it looks like this is the 3-port. So we see the 2 screws here, so we know it's the 2-port, not the 3-port. So you want to have a 3-port. This is the 2-port. You can see the 2 screws here, and it does look like it's disconnected, I believe, right? So it more than likely has an electric fuel pump on it. Guys, add that. It's not that expensive, and you can have it on a toggle switch to either prime it, or in this case, if it's totally bypassed, what that's telling us is it has a full-time manual fuel pump, electric fuel pump, so that it's not using the mechanical fuel pump right here. Hey, you could put it back the way it was, but again, if you have a 2-port and it's working, you typically want to go with the 3-port. We can also see that it has air condition. Again, air condition typically raises the value about 10%, according to Haggerty, and it was a feature $500 to $600 back in the day. Most cars have it, I think, that I've seen, but you'll certainly see them, and you've seen them on the channel here where there's no compressor. It'll just have heat. It won't have AC. Of course, you don't have to worry about that here. We do see that it has the single reservoir. I've talked about that at length. I would highly suggest that you change that out. You can see here where the fuel lines are kind of teed in. I mean, I would probably kind of put this back to the way it was. Not a fan of having this extra stuff here if you don't need it. You can see down here, it looks like that they have the fuel filter, and this is capped off. So again, typically the fuel lines are going to run right here and have some insulation around them into here, and then you have your fuel line up to your carburetor. I do believe someone commented on this as well and mentioned in the write-up that it has a 4-barrel. Keep in mind, 61 had the 2-barrel, so if it's either an error in the listing or they did upgrade it. I do believe if you go with the 4-barrel, I think you have to go with the upgraded, or you have to go with the intake as well. I think you have to change that, I believe. But regardless, 61 did have a 2-barrel carburetor. You could see oftentimes, as I mentioned, you'll see a little wire here and there. Sometimes people are running that for a jumper or something's not working correctly. Or maybe the wire was frayed over time and they butt connected it just to get something working. So that can easily be changed. Everything looks good here. And just so you guys know, the fan is going to have a fan clutch if it has air conditioning. So the fans are a little bit different if you have AC, and you will see these cars without a fan shroud, and others have chimed in to reinforce that. Keep me honest, if you do not have AC, the fan is a little bit different. I think it has one less blade, and it confuses me sometimes. It won't have a fan shroud if there's no AC. The battery there, obviously, it's easy to change in these cars. I don't know if this is the factory. I can never remember if this is the factory stick here to check the oil. My 64, when I got it, it had a different one. What'll happen is the end will break on here and someone will stick something else in. I can't remember if these had a yellow end. I want to say they did not, but certainly if you don't have the right oil dipstick, if this wasn't the correct one, then the link can be different, and that can make it a challenge checking the oil. In fact, I knew mine was not right on my 64, and when we compared it to my friend Tony with his Mel 430 engine, mine was a lot, it wasn't the proper length. So I, of course, got one from a parts car, but you guys could chime in. I don't remember this being yellow, but again, I can't remember everything. If nothing else, it's a good discussion point. Underneath the car, this is important to see these photos. I mean, to me, having scanned through them briefly, it looks good. It looks solid. It looks something that's not rusty. Certainly this discoloration and the oil leaks that these cars have and things like that. I mean, this all to me, for the most part, looks the way you would expect it to look. This fuel line here, you could see at some point, this looks a little crusty. This isn't, typically this isn't broken at all, but at some point, when they probably cleaned the fuel lines, this was nasty or something, and they just put this little piece in. In the Lincoln forum, I have a write-up on my 64 build, and I actually replaced all these lines, and it's not that hard to bend a whole one from the front to the back, but you can see here, not a deal breaker, certainly. Everything under this oil, up in here looks about as I would expect it to. I've seen cars far worse in terms of being super dirty. This one looks typical. Even this, I had looked at this photo before I started, and this doesn't look bad. I mean, if I was looking at this car, I would want to just double check to make sure there is no rot underneath it. But from the photos and the appearance overall, it does look fine. This is from the back. This is the gas tank, and you can see here a little bit of just kind of surface rust on the brackets that kind of hold the gas tank. But again, just normal stuff. Certainly in here, again, I would be checking all this just to make sure with kind of like a screwdriver, just to make sure there's nothing crusty going on in here. But as far as we can tell, it looks pretty solid. I often talk about looking at this piece. My friend TC always reinforced that looking underneath where the battery sits, where we saw a few minutes ago, and looking at that cross member, making sure that nothing here is real rusted out. Sometimes if there's leaks and things like that, especially the battery acid underneath the battery can get real nasty. But typically, if it's just a little bit of rust in there, that can be cut out if need be. We can see it does look like it has new bushings for the sway bar. Sway bar is very important on these cars. And here's some of the paperwork. Rod and chassis, you can see a $4,000 bill here. Diagnose convertible top fluid leak. Inspect hydraulic system. Parts, research, and estimating. You can see that stuff's not cheap. So there's a little bit of insight here to what they did. Continue attempts to bleed hydraulic system, including vacuum pressure, manual air release from You can see through there. Diagnose top not working. So I would want to get on the phone with them and say, hey, if there was a, diagnosis, what was it? You can see here a little bit of paperwork with it. And then this is Elvis in the motor vehicle. Kind of talks about some of the information there. And this might be People's Choice Award in the show. So some sort of little tie-in there. Maybe he just, sometimes people would put that, hey, he liked Lincolns. I seriously doubt he was tied to it. I think it would call that out more here in the write-up. But 61 is obviously a beautiful car. People love it. And if we go down here, you'll see in a lot of the comments, different folks chiming in, and they talk about Elwood Engel, so Elwood that designed these cars. People just love the 61. There's people chiming in saying, hey, there should be more information about the top not working. I certainly agree. There should be videos. I totally get that. But it is kind of good to look down there. Maybe it jogs your memory on, hey, something I should be asking or something I would have wanted to ask. Super nice car. I mean, I think overall, and when I say super nice, let me rephrase that. Super nice survivor car with not too much monkeying around. Maybe get the fuel pump back to the 3-port and kind of get rid of some of that stuff. But I think overall, someone will end up with a car, hopefully that they can get in and drive once they figure out what's going on with the top. Here are a couple other things in closing. Do all the windows work? Do the auto drops work? If we had more video, I mean, I like to see in the video someone hits the horn. Does it work? I know you guys are thinking, hey, the horn, no big deal. They can be a little bit of a pain, especially in the later year Lincolns where they're up in the bumper because they get water in them and they often just don't work. So if you kind of want everything working and you want to make sure you're safe and you got the horn and stuff, if someone does a video or you're looking at selling your car in the future, go through and say, look, headlights come on, windshield wipers work, the horn works, the auto drops work, the lights work, or the windows work. For instance, we know the vent windows more than likely work, but hey, heck, go through them and turn them, show them they open all the way, they close all the way. Show the deck lid working. Obviously, I know that there's a challenge with the convertible on this, but it's certainly not going to hurt to spend a little bit of time and go through that. And if anything, it's going to help elevate the price and it's going to give the people the assurance of, wow, everything works on this car. So there you have it. What do I think it will sell for? I don't know. This is a rhetorical question I ask myself. Let's look back at this really quickly, okay? If we look at this car here that I said the other day sold for $70,000 and it's a 63, it's not the factory color. There's some things with it, it's missing little trim pieces and stuff. I mean, to me, if this car sold for 70, even without the videos and things like that, I would think that this car, 63 is desirable, 61 people just love. My guess is it's going to go for $54,000 to $65,000. I don't know. That's just my little game I play in my head. We'll see. I do think it should go for over 70 if the other one did. But we'll see. What do you guys think? Leave a comment. Certainly appreciate the support. Stay on the rise. And thanks for sticking with me to the end. Take care, everyone. The Lincoln Addict, we out of here.